Greeting, Edge Hill people. Today we have a rather long reading, and at the center of the story we have Jesus gracefully healing a man who was born blind. He also, if you listen carefully, he teaches that we shouldn't point a finger at the Pharisees or the disciples or even those Christians who live down the street who differ from us. We're called simply to be God's love in the world. But today, because of the coronavirus, these are very strange and awkward times. Think about it. We all have to be obsessed with not touching anyone, not even touching our own faces, and obsessed with washing our hands repeatedly. But yet we know we're called to enter into relationships and care for people in need. And yes, caring tends to get our hands dirty. Just like Jesus gets his hands dirty, mixing mud to place on the blind man's eyes in today's story. I find it eerily ironic that we're called to care for the most vulnerable around us. But today, the best way we can love them is to stay away. It's counterintuitive and maddening at times, but it's so important because people's lives literally depend on it. So please be patient, take care of yourself, and feel your love that you have for your neighbor. And remember, this is only temporary. We'll get through it, and we'll be stronger as a result. God will see to it. Yes, these are strange times indeed. Alrighty, it's quite a long reading, but it's got so much in it. In our story, the man has been labeled, born blind, for his entire life. We humans love to label and classify things, don't we? I think it stems from our desire for order and for control. Once labeled and placed in a category, people are free to go about their lives without giving much more thought to this man born blind. He was safely categorized and filed away. But that label, man born blind, it changed the day Jesus got involved. Once society labels and classifies someone, society expects that person to stay in their place. And when they don't, it makes people anxious. It messes up their comfortable status quo and it disrupts their illusion of control and order. But the rest of the story, in fact, the rest of chapter 9, focuses on the repeated disagreements and comical confusion about what exactly had happened to the man born blind. Jesus interrupted their status quo. Yeah, and it confused people. And the rest of the story tells us that the public blindness, as they stumbled through trying to figure out how this blind man was now able to see, reminds me of a story that I heard at Vanderbilt Divinity School from a classmate of mine. She was sharing a story of her visit to Salem, Massachusetts, the site of the infamous witch trials. She told of once seeing a striking street mural of a man dressed in a 17th century outfit, sternly pointing an accusing finger off to his left, yelling, "Witch! Witch!" But looking closely, he noticed that the artist had given the man doing the accusing a green complexion, a wicked expression, a crooked finger, and a wart on his nose. In this single image, he captured a profound idea. It's often the act of exclusion itself, the one that points at and accuses somebody else, that actually embodies what it claims to condemn. In John's story, The very one thought to be sinful turns out to be a worthy apostle. And the very ones thought to be righteous turn out to be blind to the harm they were doing through their judgment and their exclusion. So let's look at it. As Jesus walked with his disciples, they came upon a man, and almost immediately the disciples asked, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" It reminds me of a message I got early last week. I received a text from a college friend of mine who was afraid. He asked me if I thought God was behind the coronavirus because of the state of the world. I answered, not in the least. And I think God is counting on us to be responsible channels of mercy and compassion at this time. And we do that by following the instructions from our public health officials. I continued, bad things have always happened. And they're going to continue to happen. And our job is to, one, be responsible. And then two, focus on caring for those in need. Because God is counting on us. The characters in today's story were not doing this. Their focus wasn't on caring or even knowing the blind man. They didn't see him as a child of God. They saw him as a theological argument to strengthen and affirm their own belief systems. Rather than caring for him, it's just easier to ask things like, how can my belief system or my morality system account for this person's suffering? Who sinned, him or his parents? We have belief systems for good reasons, but when our belief systems and social systems keep us out of relationship with others, it tends to make our belief systems useless and disconnected from doing God's work in the world today. That's how institutional legalism in religious circles perpetuates itself, and it allows suffering to continue. When people see a blind man, they too often ask, why is there blindness in the world? Why is there poverty in the world, or illness, or suffering? Who's to blame, nurture or nature? This man or his parents? I mean, they're great questions, but by only focusing on the questions, we give ourselves permission not to really see the person as a beloved child of God. Not only do we not see them as a human being, more importantly, we fail to accept the risk of being changed through our relationship with them. When the disciples focus on the cause of the man's suffering, Jesus, as he so often does, answers with something the disciples didn't even think of. Jesus said, neither this man sinned nor his parents. He is just blind. Bad things happen sometimes, but through this blindness and the way we treat him, we can see God at work in our response and our relationship with him. Finally, an accurate way to interpret human need and suffering. When Jesus sees someone in need, he doesn't use that person's situation to develop a political or a moral agenda. Jesus sees a hurting child of God in an opportunity to recognize and participate in God's love. You see, God's love isn't revealed in moral or legal statements, but through acts of mercy and kindness and grace and compassion. Those things that honors the humanity of a person and protects the dignity of all people. Today, here at Edge Hill, we see and we love the 400 families living in concentrated poverty in the Edge Hill community. And we wonder why most of Nashville doesn't see them or doesn't even notice them. Because for most of suburban Nashville, our neighbors are simply out of sight and out of mind. That's what concentrated poverty does. But these past few weeks, we have seen an unbelievable outpouring of support and love from people recognizing the needs of our neighbors, all of our neighbors, following the tornadoes in Middle Tennessee, and now even in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic, despite the complications that have entered our lives because of the pandemic. But families are being fed. Metro schools are providing free breakfasts and lunches at E.S. Rose Magnet School and across the region. Second Harvest, the Bridge Ministries, are providing food bags to the neighborhood for as long as supplies last. And this coming Monday, I'm receiving the full inventory from the food pantry at West End Middle School. And Nancy and I will work together to distribute this surplus food to neighborhood families. Even as we're living in physical isolation, you see, God is working through humanity to creatively find ways to love our neighbors. And we are a people of hope. We will make it through this current crisis. And I ask that you continue to care for one another. Reach out, touch base, assure people they're going to be okay, find out what they need. And one other thing, send me an email or Cindy Morrison an email of your prayer requests, especially your joys, and I'll compile those and then share those through the emails that I send out. And that way we can all stay connected as a congregation in prayer. Today's story reminds us that every person, blind or seeing, rich or poor, Pharisee or disciple, is an opportunity for us to participate in the great movement of God's love. Each of us is an opportunity for God to reveal what matters most in its most elegant simplicity: relationships, compassion, mercy, justice. Let Jesus touch your eyes so we can better see the light of the world. And let's not be afraid to get our hands dirty. Just make sure you wash them for at least 20 seconds afterwards. Amen.